session, and I will announce that we do not have anything to report out of closed session. So we'll move on to our first item, which is the consent agenda. Any questions, comments, changes to any item you'd like to pull for discussion? If not, let me check. There's no one in the public, so we'll open and close public comment and bring it back. If there's a motion and a second to approve, happy to entertain that.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Klein?
Is there a second?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And can we get a roll call vote, please, Auden?
Yes. Klein?
Yes.
Klein, aye. Wilia?
I was not at the meeting, so if you don't need my vote, I'll abstain, please.
All right. Wilia abstain. Fliger?
Yes.
Fliger, aye. And Abukoga?
Aye.
Abukoga,
Sorry,
aye. With
Auden, I'm jumping in. We are talking November meeting, right?
This was for the approval of November and December board meeting minutes.
Because I was there at the December. That's what I just suddenly realized. November I was not. December I was.
Okay.
So, sorry about that, Margaret. A little slow here.
Would
What do
you
you
like
recommend?
would you like to abstain from the November?
And yes, for December. Let's do that. Thank you.
We can split
Perfect.
that.
Appreciate your help.
Great.
okay. I can note that in the minutes.
So motion carries. 3 ayes and 1 abstention on the November minutes. Great, thank you. So we'll go on to item 2. So this is about agendas for our meetings in January. And I think we need to maybe first talk about the meeting. So normally we would have it on the second Thursday of each month, but VTA decided to move their meeting to the second meeting of this month because of their selection of their chair and vice chair scheduled, and they wanted everybody seated and for that. So as a result, we had to look at moving our meeting, and we landed on Thursday, the January 26th. And we had planned for the 3 meetings of a legislative action committee, and then we need to do the city selection committee meeting, and then our regular board meeting. So I believe the proposal was 4:30 start for LAC. 4:30 to 5:45, and then 6 to 7 for CSC, and then 7 to 8:30 for our board meeting. But I think, Larry, you had some.
Yes. So that is our all-day strategic session. So we'll be starting at 8:30, and I finalized. So we finalized the agenda, and I've had a preliminary agenda last, in December, but we finalized the agenda on Tuesday. So I'm meeting with the city manager and the new vice mayor on Tuesday about what that looks like. And normally that meeting goes to about 4:30 and maybe 5 o'clock. And I have 3 new council members, so I do worry about that. That being said, I know, Margaret, you said that conceivably this is a presentation, and I hate to be the LAC chair and not be there for that first meeting. Nisa, I might impose upon you to take over that meeting. If our meeting goes long, it's going to be a long day, but I'm ready to do that. And we almost assuredly will be done by 5 p.m. with, in my 6 years on 6+ years on council, we've always ended before 5, and sometimes at 4, sometimes at 4:30, sometimes at 4:45. I'll be trying to keep the meeting as smooth as possible and keeping it going. So I'm hoping to be done by 4:30. But that being said, Nisa, I have no problem of doing, of running the LAC meeting in general, but this might be an exception since it's an exception date anyway from that standpoint.
So a couple of things about the time. Because we have the 3 meetings and they're meaty, we had to look at extending, but also with the LAC, and this is actually up for discussion. It seemed like in the past, the 1 hour LAC meetings are just a little too short on time. There's just a lot to cover and never enough time to do it. And one of some of the concerns or suggestions like we've been hearing from some of the cities as we've been working with on the JPA is just the interest of or making sure that all cities, small, medium, large, are heard in an equal fashion. And so, and it seemed like a lot of that had to do with just like the positions we take on legislation. And so my suggestion was going to be to extend the LAC meetings from moving forward to an hour and a half. And so, I wanted to pose that to the board actually at the meeting to see if there would be interest in doing that. But so this meeting from 4:30 to 5:45 was an hour 15 to just sort of ease into that. But I guess, Larry, we needed to discuss what the agenda for the LAC meeting would be. And this is where I was going to ask Kimber or Christina. They had kindly reached out to the Rennie Group, that is our legislative consultant for the city of Mountain View, and our point person there. I think he had offered to come do a presentation on what to expect this year at the state. And so if he's still available to do that, we could do that and cut it down to however long we want to make the meeting. So if we want to start the meeting at 5, we'll just go for an hour till 6. And we had that buffer between the CSC, LAC and CSC, but we can shorten that too.
Thank you. And but I'll be honest, as far as and this is kind of the trade-off of having the selection committee and the LAC meeting, the first meetings. And in my opinion, the selection committee is actually more important for because there are appointments that we need to finalize in January from an IGR standpoint, that an hour, we've run out of time. If I remember last year or previous years, we've often we'll hold off on that appointment until next month, and not giving either the applicants appropriate time to speak, or the other half of that is, it's like enough discussion for the board member or for the selection members to actually have any real discussion on the possible candidates or the trade-offs. And so it always felt a little rammed through. I don't know how many open positions we have right now. I haven't looked at that. Did that go out already?
Auden can probably answer that.
Okay.
If you have the list,
Yeah.
you can share it on the screen. That would be helpful.
Yes, I can share that on the screen. Give me a moment to open that up.
I'm seeing 8.
Yeah, and if we give each candidate, so this becomes the bigger question, and in my opinion, that's at least it's not an hour. It's usually an hour to go through about 4 people when it really comes down to it. When we've been doing selection, maybe 5 people in the past. To go through 8 people is at least an hour and a half, if not longer. And I'll leave it at that. I don't know what the core meeting is, and this is, these are the trade-offs that we're trying to do at the executive board meeting. But that's just my takeaway very quickly.
Nisa?
So it's 10 positions.
Thanks, Margaret. My question, and it actually piggybacks well onto what Larry was saying, was whether or not we even need a LAC meeting in January. It's by March that I think we really pick up speed on LAC. And so I think we could, especially because it's an off day too, to try to do 3 meetings on an off day. Maybe we do only the selections committee. And we saw last year, to Larry's point, we went way over and we had Supervisor Chavez waiting. Remember, it was very awkward. So I would support just not doing a LAC, and Larry, who's our chair, even though I'm happy to cover for him, he may not be available. And so I would support just not doing a LAC in January and having it February 9th. But I support Margaret's suggestion to have our LAC meeting be scheduled for an hour and a half. And if it ends early, fine. But as the former LAC chair, there were definitely some meetings where I felt rushed. And so to give Larry that 90 minutes or hour and 15 minutes, if he ends early, great, but I think it would help to give the LAC meeting more time.
Great. Yeah, so I agree. I think if we just, let's just not do the LAC until February 9th and just focus on CSC. And then let's say, why don't we start the CSC at 5:30 to 7? Does that sound? And then that would hopefully give the Sunnyvale folks time to take a little break after your all-day session and come to the CSC. So yeah, so we'll just plan on that. And then could I ask Christina or Kimbra, could we reach out to Dane to see if he would be available to join us on the February 9th at the LAC meeting to do a presentation for us? And Larry, do you want to I guess we should poll the LAC members once we know who they are to see if they can do an hour and a half and start at 5:30. And then depending on what they say, we'll schedule it for either 90 minutes or an hour.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Okay, great. So then going to the CSC, I'm sorry, Auden, if you could pull that list up again. We do have 10 positions. There's some that are, I'm expecting folks to re-up their positions, like Bachman, the two, I think are planning to re-up. So I don't know if that, I would think that might affect how many people will apply for that, but I hope we can get through this in an hour and a half.
One of the things that I want to make sure is the alternates, that we have alternates for some of these positions in case our representative, and I don't know how closely we've looked at that in the past, but wanting to see, I just want to kind of go through here. So whether or not we need to look at any alternates, but like Measure A, there's one rep. And I don't know, and a lot of this has to do with how that organization was set up. I think Glenn was our past Measure A representative and did a great job as far as that's concerned. But I'm assuming, and I think he made every meeting, but whether or not we want to conceivably create alternate positions so that, we're all juggling a lot of different things. And it also gives, let's say, some notoriety or gives another position out there that it kind of is a consolation prize. And it's also kind of a transitional thing that from a BCDC standpoint, Pat Burt reached out that all of a sudden BCDC this past year created alternates for all their positions because they were worried about getting quorums for some of their big votes. And so I do think from an organizational standpoint, we should take a quick look at that. And I don't know, I know I'm kind of throwing that, it's not part of our discussion here, but I do think it has overall educational value, and it also creates a member in waiting that when we do see a transition out of a position, we're not just, okay, I'm interested in this and I've never went to a meeting, or I've watched the last 2 meetings and hopefully I understand what's going on. So I'll just throw that out there also.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Tina.
I agree pretty much with what has been said so far. And Larry, you bring up a good point. Even last year, if memory serves me right, there was one position where we didn't have an alternate, and there was some discussion about that. I forget if we added that or we said we can't. Memory's off on that, but I do recall having that conversation. I was puzzled and somebody else was. I may have brought it up for somebody else. So I agree with all that has been said.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would agree. I think it just depends on the agencies because some agencies don't allow it. I know like MTC doesn't. So for those that do allow it or don't, it's up to us. And certainly I think we should do that. But yeah, it'll depend on the agency. So Shelley, would you mind looking, or Shelley and Auden looking through the list to see which ones do allow for alternates, and then we can, add that to the list as openings.
Certainly.
Then will be some, I'm imagining there'll be some who are alternates who can move up to the primary position. So then there'll be openings there. The other item that that came up actually just from my situation is that I'm the MTC rep filling out the leftover time of Jeannie Bruins, former member Jeannie Bruins's 4-year term. And I asked MTC if that was like the schedule was set by them, and they responded that no, it's set by the appointing agency. And so I'm interested in applying for the next term, but I also term out in 2 years. So I was thinking that if I were to be reappointed, what I would ask is that they make my term then just a 4-year term. So then in the next, when I term out in 2 years, the new person can start a 4-year term. And we were actually discussing this, Shelley and Auden and I, and we're thinking that perhaps we even could set a policy where, like if it's an unexpired term because someone is terming out, the new person coming in would reset and start a new term. And this is really kind of in response to the interest of, succession and continuity and yeah, given the situation that I'm in, we came up with this potential policy addition. So wanted to hear what you thought of that, Larry.
So I like the policy. The only problem is most of the terms are set by the organizations themselves, and we can't say just please reset it. It's at least from what I've seen, it's they have their timetable, which we have to figure out how to match. And so I'm not sure how that works. A lot of times it's even, it's state legislation that would need to change in order to give us that flexibility. So I've had lots of discussions with Gustav and Glenn on several of their appointments that it's like, okay, yeah, it would be nice if this changed, but it would require state legislation to do some fixes. And so we basically gave up. That it's like, okay, when you're off council, we'll deal with it and we'll deal with the timing. And there's at least one organization that we've actually continued to appoint Gustav on because it doesn't need to be from a city standpoint. He's chair for Bosca and this coming year. And it's like, okay, he's off council. He's our rep to some degree because of his experience and because that's where he is right now. But it didn't make sense to appoint somebody new when he is the most experienced and they need that leadership over the next year. So, but we can't force them to change certain things. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Lisa?
And my dog is barking, I'm sorry. So that's my experience is very similar to Larry's, where the agency sets the term. And so I'm very surprised that MTC said they leave it up to each organization to determine what the term is. So maybe this is something Shelley and Auden can also look into, similar to what they're doing for the other item. How many agencies leave it up to us to pick the term. And then when we draft the policy, it would be, if it's just one agency, the MTC, that leaves it up to us, then I don't think it's worth spending time drafting a policy. But if there are enough agencies that really defer to us, then I like your suggestion of just having it be a clean transition when we have people step off before the end of their term.
Will do. Sounds good.
Great. So do you think we could have that ready by the 26th? So CSC, I think we've said it, so it only meets twice a year now in January and I believe June.
I think it's April.
April. Oh, okay. I guess there's no rush to this, so we could wait until April if you need some time to do the research.
Okay.
I would be able to review it by the 26th.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah. I think we can probably ask that when we ask the other question of whether we can allow, whether we can choose alternates, or whether they allow alternates.
Oh, good. Yes. Great. Thank you. Yes, Auden.
I would just say that I can say that we do appoint for quite a few alternate positions, but that we will go through all of them to make sure that we are appointing for all of them that allow them.
Okay, any other questions on CSC or comments? If not, we'll go to the agenda for our board meeting. So we'll start at 7. And we have the consent item calendar. I know there was some back and forth about the continuing to meet over Zoom or our hybrid meetings. Yes, Mary, do you have some?
Yeah, so I spoke with Shelley a bit about this over email, but as you all probably are very familiar with all of the many bodies you sit on, we've all been meeting remotely pursuant to AB 361 and the relaxed teleconference rules for the Brown Act. The governor's state of emergency doesn't expire until the end of February. However, most bodies, including you all, were relying for the state and local recommendations for social distancing. We're relying on a recommendation from the county health officer, Dr. Sarah Cody, which was rescinded at the end of December. So she's no longer recommending that government bodies meet remotely. And so all of the county's bodies are coming back to in person starting on Monday. And I think many cities and towns have already been meeting in person for their city and town council meetings. Most of the school districts have been doing that for quite some time as well. So I think we wanted to discuss with you all whether you want to put something on the agenda. I think we would need to do some digging and some research and thinking as to whether or not there are state and local recommendations for social distancing that would support continued findings. So I wanted to open that up to you all first to see what your thinking is.
That's Lisa. Yes.
So just so I understand it, because we've started meeting in person. So is the question whether, are we talking about the executive committee or the full board of directors? Because we started meeting in person with a hybrid option back in November, was it, Margaret? So what is the question and which meeting are we referring to?
Go ahead, Margaret. My apologies.
Sorry, no, thank you. So it would be, I guess, frankly, all of our meetings, whether we can do them hybrid or, and I did have a question on that because with some of my other regional boards, we were looking at being able to provide a remote location. So in our situation, the challenge has always been Morgan Hill and Gilroy. Their commute up here is far. So if we could find a location in either city, could they still Zoom in as long as we did the noticing, the 72-hour noticing?
So that's a really great question. And to Nisa's question as well, I think what we are talking about is all meetings. That in general, we're reverting back to the long-standing teleconference rules in the Brown Act. So you do still have those abilities, which you can use, which to Margaret's point, yes, you have to put it on the agenda. It needs to be a publicly accessible location where members of the public can also participate there, and things of that nature. Obviously, for you all, that might actually be quite workable. For many bodies, that's not very workable because the remote location they want to use is their house, and people don't actually want to make that open to the members of the public. But so you do have those background pre-existing teleconferencing rules for the Brown Act, but the more flexible teleconference rules of AB 361 is what we're really speaking about. So if you did your hybrid meeting, as you were discussing, with following the pre-existing, the long-standing Brown Act teleconferencing rules, that would be totally fine.
So then at this point, then do we need, we don't, should we remove the item from the agenda? Because it sounds like there's no resolution to pass. Is that correct? Yes, Tina.
Thank you, Margaret. At SVCE, we also reviewed was it 1449? Help me, someone.
2449. 2449, yeah.
2449, okay, close enough. Thank you. But I just wanted to bring that up, whatever that number is, 2449, thank you. That has been added as an other option, and perhaps Larry remembers more about that, or Mary can help.
So absolutely. So there are new, somewhat more flexible teleconferencing rules that are available if a quorum are meeting in person, or more of them quorum. So, and then you can use these new teleconferencing rules that are slightly more flexible. They do require a way for members of the public to also participate remotely, whereas the traditional Brown Act teleconferencing rules actually don't. But they're only available for just cause and emergency circumstances for the members, and the members who are participating remotely do have to disclose their just cause or emergency circumstance. They're defined by statute what counts as a just cause. It's the things you might expect, like you're sick, your family member's sick, things of that nature. And then there's a couple other little pieces to that puzzle. So that's an available option as well, if you all have the technology and staffing support to pull off the continued two-way remote options for members of the public as well, because that would be required under those rules.
If I remember correctly, at SVCE, we gave that as another option in addition to the old teleconferencing, so that with the unpredictability with even, for example, COVID cases going up and down, if somebody literally last minute came down with a positive test. I'm just trying to recall that conversation without bringing all of that discussion here. That's why I'm bringing it up. I don't have anything more to add. I think most of you are very familiar with that, if we want to consider that.
Lisa?
So two things. One, to your question, Margaret, and for the executive committee, we'll say Margaret, but for the big board, we have to say president, because we did that with Chappie, remember? So to your question about whether or not we still need to adopt the resolution, for me, it doesn't hurt to adopt the resolution on January 26th. Who knows what will happen in February. So it gives us that option. Actually, Mary mentioning Dr. Cody's rescinding her order. I didn't realize that was interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing that, because we were operating under Newsom's order. So that's very interesting, Mary. So Margaret, I do think we should still adopt the resolution in January, just in case we all need to meet remotely in February. And then to Tina's point about I think a lot of us are on SVCE as well, or at least I was. I like the approach, which I think that's what we were saying, where we are going to operate under the old Brown Act rules. The only difference is we would now identify specific locations where, for those individuals who are going to participate remotely, instead of them doing it in their homes or in a hotel room like we did pre-COVID, they would at least have a location to go to, but it's still under the old Brown Act rules, where we notice we put on their door wherever they are. So that was the nice compromise I liked. So it's still the old Brown Act, but we're identifying locations for them to do that remote meeting.
Margaret, if I may.
Oh, Could I ask Mary to response first?
Sure, just briefly. So for the old teleconference rules and for the new AB 2449 rules, there's no resolution needed. Those are just statutory rules that exist at this time. I think if you are interested in pursuing possibly continuing to adopt an AB 361 resolution at your meeting, we will have to redraft it and also really think about what we could use to support, because the rules under AB 361 require both a state of emergency, which the governor's state of emergency does continue, and state or local recommendations for social distancing, which we no longer have that recommendation from Dr. Cody. In our preliminary research, we have yet to identify something else that would support that, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But if you all as a body were thinking that you are comfortable with using either the existing old teleconference rules and or the new hybrid option for just cause and emergency circumstances, then you wouldn't necessarily need have a business need for figuring that out.
And if I may, Margaret, so to respond to that, Mary, I was thinking 361, but that's because I didn't understand that Dr. Cody's order also applied. I was only thinking about Governor Newsom's order and the fact that we had until February 28th.
Yes, Larry.
And I just wanted to add that, this is one of the things that I think all of our board members have alternates. And so I like, from my standpoint, and I don't think that it's critical that, if you get sick, you can't come, hopefully your alternate is able to come and represent your city. So I do think it's valuable. But yeah, BCDC has a similar issue because it rings the bay. And so Mountain View is one of the locations that I've went, and, Pat Showalter and I have been the only ones in the room during, with our laptops, zooming in from the specified location. And I think that works out conceivably, depending upon what Morgan Hill or Gilroy does, something very similar, whether or not they set up a room thing or whether or not both of their council members are on Zoom at their laptops in that specified location that's on our agenda. I think that's completely fine. And I think that's a good, as much as we'd like them to join our meetings, and hopefully they will come every now and then, it's good to have that as a standard. So I do think it's important to bring it on the agenda, just so that we talk about that as what our process is going forward. So I do think it's send your alternate if you can't come, and and we have two locations, the primary and the secondary location within the county.
Great. So I think then for now, Shali, if I could ask you to check in with Morgan Hill and Gilroy to see if they have interest in setting up a remote location. And then if so, what that would be. So then we can add that to our agenda for noticing purposes.
Okay, and just to clarify, the secondary location, would it be open to anyone? Like, let's say there was someone from Los Altos. Nisa, if you happen to be in Morgan Hill that day, you could go there too. It wouldn't just be for Morgan Hill and Gilroy. Am I understanding that correctly? The secondary location would be for anyone who wants to join from that area.
That is how the teleconference rules back in the background work. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So then just to reiterate, so we do not need to adopt the resolution, or okay. So we'll take that off, take item consent.
Because we would have to do a finding for the local jurisdiction too.
Yeah. Okay.
So we should have an information only item somewhere on the agenda for what our next step is going to be. We don't need to take action as a board, but talking about how our agendas will be changing in future months, at least from a noticing standpoint.
Good. Thank you. Good suggestion. So could we add that then, Shali, to the agenda in as a, I think we should do it as item 2. So after consent, we'll do that as a business item, informational item.
I'll work with Mary on the wording of that. Just in my notes, I have add discussion of primary and secondary locations for meeting. You know, it's how we move forward.
Great, thank you. So then next item is the ratification of the approval of agreement with Mary in Santa Clara County of Santa Clara for general counsel services. So this is for Mary's contract. And then yes, so we need to just ratify that, approve that. And then there's an actually that came up that we need to add to the agenda, and I was hoping, Mary, you could provide advice on where. So we have a vacancy on our executive board because Rich Constantine not returning. Chappie Jones, our former president, before he left, appointed Larry and myself and himself as a nominating committee, and we asked Hung Wei from Cupertino if she would join the executive board as our at-large member, which she has agreed to. So I believe we need board approval to make that appointment. Should that be the first item we do? Or I don't know if like consent is always the first item we do, or where that should fall in the agenda. And I can, just leave it up to you to put it where it should be, but that is an item we need to
And this would be to elect somebody to the executive board. So for the board of directors to elect somebody to the executive board, I think you could probably put that anywhere you want on the agenda,
okay.
wherever it makes sense to you.
Why don't we do that after consent then as the first item? And then we'll do ratification of the general counsel as the third item. Tina, I'm sorry, Tina.
Yeah, very quickly, Margaret, thank you. I think the vote for me happened for member at large. And so would you also need to add that for me to be moved to the secretary treasurer position, or how does that work out?
That's a very good point. I don't think we ever voted. So because as a result of Rich departing, we moved everybody up. So Larry moved from secretary treasurer to second vice president, and Tina from at large to secretary. Do we need to actually take a formal vote to do that?
Why don't we, Shelley and I circle on the bylaws to confirm, and we'll put it all together as an item on the agenda if you do need it.
Thank you.
So can I just confirm? So consent is still item 1, and is the executive board, that's item 2? Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the interim general counsel contract is item 3?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you want to put the discussion of the noticing of meetings in primary and secondary locations as item 4? Is that what we're talking about? Would it be helpful if Auden shared her screen with the agenda on it?
Sure.
We have something to look at. It might be easier that way. Okay. Thank you for working on this live, Auden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the order is, if there's no, Mary, if there's nothing that requires us to do it in a specific order, I mean, I could just leave it up to you, Shelley and Mary, to come up with the order, if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
Great. Okay, so then the next item is goal setting. So this would be a discussion and potential vote on our priorities for the year. And last year, our priorities were local control, professional development, climate change, and race equity. So what I thought we would do is, professional development. I wanted to suggest that we continue that, but just continue it as one of the city's association's, bread and butter activities. So, having Kevin Duggan in the workshop, I thought was very productive and helpful. And I think there is interest to continue that. And so, like, I'd like to see if we can schedule a session again this year with him. And then we had some conversations about what about a orientation or training for new council members on how to be a good council member and whatnot. And we could even roll into that orientation of our city's association and what we do. And looking at maybe like a late February, early March timeframe to offer that. So with those two activities, we could fulfill the professional development piece and just maybe take it off of our priorities for the year, but just make it an ongoing thing. And then the local control one, I guess I could open it up to the board. My thought was that I would just ask the board if they want to continue with these goals or priorities or want to add anything else. And like if we, move over professional development, I think we'd have space for at least one more goal. But I did want to open it up to everyone in case, they have new goals that they want to do. And in the past, the year before last, our goals included transportation and housing. And so I don't know if there's an interest to go back to those types of issues. But for our meeting, the thought was that I'd just present what our goals were last year, see if there's any interest in keeping any of them. And then if there's also interest in adding any new ones. Does that sound reasonable? Or if you have any other ideas on how to do goals. Yes, Larry.
So yes, I think that sounds reasonable. And I do think that continuing the efforts to, and you look at the turnout that we had for how to be a better council member and all that session, I think it was very well attended. That being said, we have a lot of new council members. I think, planning to do that again this year, having good turnout, I think all that's very positive from that standpoint. So definitely I would continue focusing on that. I'll be honest, I'm meeting with all my new council members and kind of helping them, part of that is going through that presentation, and it might be duplication, but I do think getting everybody, council members across the county, in a room to talk about how to be a better council member and issues that they have, I think that's worthwhile. So I think continuing that. As far as additional goals, I would kind of leave it. I would let the board, whether or not we want to go back to some of the housing or transportation goals. It would be interesting to see what the board is interested in. So I'll leave it at that.
So we can open it up, and in the past we did the dot exercise, and I was just thinking, maybe we just do that again. So we could take suggestions on topics, and then we'll have everybody get up and put dots on the walls. Yes, Nisa.
I like that idea. I like engaging the board. I mean, we can propose, do we just revert or continue on with the goals? But let's hear from them. I think our goals from last year are so comprehensive. I'd be curious to hear what other topic other board members come up with. One question I have, Margaret, and I was actually trying to find it. So I do remember those, and maybe it's in the packet and I missed it. I remember those being the broad goals from last year. But did we narrow the scope? So housing, as we know, is super broad, transportation. Would it help to have a narrow focus under each of those broader headings?
So what we did in the past was we'd have the broad topics, and then each topic would have a committee we'd take volunteers from the board members to form a committee around that topic. And then we kind of left it up to them to decide what specifically they would want to focus on. And then the thought was that then they would be in charge of doing a presentation at one of our board meetings on that topic that they chose.
Thanks
Oh.
for the reminder. Yes. And I like that process. And again, it gets them engaged. So I like that.
I think the last time we did it, we frankly just didn't have a lot of interest. So there were some committees that, like, I think I was on transportation and it was like me and Carmen. So, it's kind of dependent on what the board members want to do. But, I think it's worth going back to that process if folks are comfortable with that. Is that okay, Tina? Yeah. Okay, great. So we'll have the dots and the big post-it board paper on the walls set up for doing that goal setting exercise then. Thank you. And then after that, we will have, actually we need to add a report out from the CSC, the selection committee meeting. And then 6, the City Managers Association update, and then the Executive Director's update. And I don't know if we'll have time for joys and challenges, but I'm happy to keep that on the monthly agenda. Any comments, suggestions, changes you would like? So if not, and I don't see any hands, I will open this up to the public if we have, and we have no public members. So I'll open and close public comment, bring it back to the board. And I believe we have to vote on these agendas. And yes, Tina.
If Auden could add that bit for the executive committee, that Mary will check with Shelley if Larry and my position, just so that we don't miss that since you're voting on it.
Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that the agenda item includes that if we're supposed to do it. For sure.
Because right now it only mentions Hung Wei, member at large. And since we are voting on it, I just want to make sure technically if we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Very fair point.
Mary can answer that.
Do you have any specific wording you would like me to use for that?
I guess if maybe you could work with Shelley and Mary Auden on the wording, that would be great.
Right. I think that
Okay,
Tina
sounds
is
good.
just asking that we put a note somewhere on number 2 that if needed, will include the other officers.
Yes, Tina and Larry. Anything else? If not, is there a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the January Board of Directors agenda with all the amendments that discussed and agreed upon.
If you could add the selection committee agenda too, that'd be great.
And it's the selections committee. Thank you.
You.
Second by Klein.
And could we get a roll call vote, Auden?
All right. Abakoga?
Aye.
Abakoga, I. Wilia?
Aye.
Wilia, I. Flagger?
Yes.
Flagger, I. And Klein?
Aye.
Klein, I. With 4 ayes, the motion carries.
Great, thank you. We'll go on to the next item, item 3. Is there a City Managers Association update, Kimbra or Christina?
Thank you, Margaret, Councilmember Abakoga. I guess we're all getting used to the terminal, President Abakoga. The only update that I would have is that we will continue to meet in our monthly meetings. We have been meeting in person in San Jose every month. I think we've started that in the fall, and everyone was just very, very happy to be back in person. So we have our monthly main meeting, which is about 2 hours in San Jose. And then we also continue to meet a week or so after that, and just like a half-hour quick Zoom call. And we started doing that at the beginning of the pandemic. All the city managers, we were meeting weekly, actually. And that was just a really wonderful chance for us to just talk about what all of our agencies were doing, what we were learning, and we found it all so rewarding and helpful that we continued that. And then it became twice a month, and now we've just incorporated it once a month with our bigger meeting. So we're still doing that, and we'll also be talking about our own agenda for the year of 2023 in our January meeting, which I believe is next week. So I'll know more information about some of the things that we'll be tackling and discussing after our own meeting next week. But happy to be here and to meet you all, and hopefully we'll be able to meet you in person soon, and look forward to working on. I know there's some items to tackle in the upcoming months, like the JPA and some other items. So we'll make sure that we have good flow between our two groups for those important items that you all will be discussing.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Kimbra? I'm sorry, City Manager McCarthy. I have to start practicing this. Doesn't look like it. So thank you. And I don't see any public members, so I'll open and close public comment. And thank you, City Manager, for your update. We'll go to item 5, our Executive Director's update. Ms. Sergey.
Hi, thank you. I don't have much of an update. I would like to thank everyone who came to our holiday party. I think it was a really good event. I think people really enjoyed seeing each other, and hope to just build on that momentum and that camaraderie going forward. I had a really good planning meeting with President Abekoga and our clerk, Auden, yesterday. Very excited about the things that we have planned for this coming year. So looking forward to it. And I'm really excited to learn what business as usual means, because I haven't really experienced that. So I'm excited to start this year off with you all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our Executive Director? So yes, the business as usual, you'll see that on our master calendar. It's basically going back to doing some policy work, the goal setting, working on those priorities, getting updates from our various appointees on these regional boards. I'm hoping to ask the Planning Collaborative folks to come more often to update us on housing and the housing element, and then the legislative work we've been doing. So just trying to get back to like meaty topics is the intent, and we're adding the professional development piece. So I'm very excited about what we have in store this year. And yes, Shelley?
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. Just in the spirit of collaboration and being as inclusive as possible, we'd like to put together a master calendar for this year. I would like to put all the various cities' city council meetings on there, all of the city manager association meetings on there, like all of it, so that we can kind of stay abreast of what's happening where and how we can be more inclusive and more collaborative. And of course, it would obviously include all of our meetings. And I think that'll help us be a little bit more streamlined and efficient, and we can focus on the good work that we do as opposed to the process, like putting a meeting together or something. But that's one of the things I'm very excited about.
Great, thank you. And yes, City Manager McCarthy.
Thank you, Councilmember Abekoga. So Christina let me know that Dane is confirmed to present on February 9th. So you're good to go.
Thank you. Fantastic. All right. Anything else? If not, I guess I do need to take public comment, although I don't see any members of the public, so I'll open and close public comment. Thank you very much for staying late. I was hoping we'd it's done sooner, but in light of the interviews and whatnot, here we are and on a Friday night, but I really appreciate all of your participation. I think we got a lot done today. And as we get into the rhythm, I think these meetings will go shorter. So thank you very much for your indulgence today, and have a great weekend, and please stay safe from the storm.
Thank you. See you guys soon.
Thank you all. Nice to meet
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good weekend.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a safe weekend.